AITA for finally snapping at my friend who thinks Sunday dinner is his personal free buffet. I have this group of friends. Every Sunday, we get together for dinner. It started as a casual thing, just a few of us hanging out, cooking, catching up, and over time, it became a tradition. The unspoken rule has always been the same: everybody contributes. Whether it is buying groceries, cooking, bringing drinks, or even just offering to help clean up after, everyone does something. That is how we keep things fair. That is how we keep things running smoothly. And for the most part, it works. Except for one person. Let's talk about Johnshu. Johnshu is 28 years old, a fully grown adult man who, by some miracle, has managed to sustain himself on the sheer generosity of others and an ungodly amount of sugar. I am talking 4-pound bags of Sour Patch Kids, Costco-sized boxes of fruit snacks, entire bags of Halloween candy inhaled in record time. I have never once seen this man consume a vegetable. But that is not the problem. The problem is that, for the entire time he has been part of this tradition, he has never, not once, bought, cooked, or contributed in any meaningful way to our Sunday dinners. He has never picked up a pack of chicken. He has never swung by the store to grab some soda. He has never even offered to wash a dish. But every single Sunday, without fail, he shows up with an empty plate and an appetite that could put a starving wolf to shame. It is not just that he eats, it is how he eats. This man loads up his plate like he is preparing for an all-you-can-eat buffet that is seconds away from closing. He does not take 1 or 2 pieces of chicken, he takes 6. He does not serve himself a reasonable portion of mashed potatoes, he takes half the bowl. If there is dessert, you can forget about getting a second helping because he will have inhaled it before you even put your fork down. At first, we let it slide. It was annoying, sure, but we assumed he would eventually catch on and start contributing. That never happened. Then came last week. Last week was the final straw, the moment when something inside me broke in a way that I knew could never be repaired. I had spent $20 on cinnamon rolls and wings. Not just any cinnamon rolls, these were the good ones, the ones from that bakery downtown that everybody loves. Another friend also picked up extra wings, just to make sure we had enough for everyone. We all sat down to eat, and as usual, Johnshu made a beeline for the food like it was his last meal on earth. He grabbed 3 cinnamon rolls. 3. Before anyone else had even gotten one. Then he loaded his plate with wings, so many wings that I genuinely wondered if he had miscounted and thought he was plating food for 3 people instead of just himself. And then, oh, then, came the Sprite incident. I had brought a 2-liter bottle of Sprite. I had only had 1 glass so far, but there was still a decent amount left. I was planning on taking it home because, you know, I paid for it. But before I could even reach for it, Johnshu picked up the bottle and, without a single ounce of hesitation, poured the rest of it into his glass. He did not ask if anyone else wanted some. He did not stop to consider if maybe, just maybe, someone else might want a refill. He just took it. And something in me snapped. I did not say anything. Not because I did not want to, oh, I had words. So many words. Words that were sitting on the tip of my tongue, waiting to be unleashed like a verbal hurricane that would rip through his entire existence and leave him questioning every single one of his life choices. But I knew if I started, I would not be able to stop. And if I did not stop, I would absolutely destroy him. So I got up. I grabbed my things, and I left early. Later, in our group chat, the one he is not in, I brought it up. Turns out, I was not alone in my frustration. Everybody was sick of it. Everybody had noticed. Everybody had reached their breaking point, but nobody had wanted to be the one to say something. Well, I was saying it now. And we all agreed, enough was enough. We are thinking of implementing a new rule. If you do not contribute, you do not eat. Simple as that. And of course, as if on cue, the excuses started rolling in. Johnshu does not have money to spend. Oh, but he had money for a $120 Dungeons and Dragons statue. Oh, but he had money for that 4-pound bag of Sour Patch Kids that disappeared in 2 days. Oh, but he had money to eat an entire 10-pound bag of Halloween candy in one night like a feral raccoon. The only thing he does not have is shame. So now, I am sitting here, wondering, am I the asshole for finally getting fed up? For drawing a line in the sand and saying, no more? Because if I am, then so be it. But at this point, something has to change. And if that means putting my foot down, then I will stomp it so hard that even Jonshu will finally feel the weight of his freeloading. Update 1. For a brief, glorious moment, it felt like we had won. The rule was simple: if you do not contribute, you do not eat. It was clear, fair, and enforced without exception. And for a few blissful weeks, it worked. Jonshu, faced with the harsh reality that free meals were no longer part of his weekly routine, stopped showing up to dinner. It was peaceful. The food stretched further. The drinks lasted longer. The atmosphere felt lighter without the underlying tension of knowing one person was going to take 3 times their fair share while giving nothing in return. But deep down, we all should have known better. Jonshu was not going to let something as minor as a well-established and explicitly stated rule keep him from his God-given right to consume anything that was not nailed down. If he could not eat with us, he would find a way to eat after us. And that is exactly what he did. It started subtly, almost innocently, like he was testing the waters. One Sunday, dinner was winding down, and as we sat around talking, laughing, and just enjoying the night, the front door swung open. In walked Jonshu, all casual-like, with that forced, exaggerated surprise that only someone with a guilty conscience can muster. Oh wow, he had just been in the area. What a total coincidence that he just so happened to show up right after dinner. No, he was not here to eat, of course not, he just wanted to see everyone, catch up, spend time together. Except the moment someone got up to clear the table, he pounced. A few leftover slices of pizza still sitting out. Gone. Someone's half-eaten plate they had momentarily stepped away from. Vanished. He moved with the speed and efficiency of a seasoned food thief, clearing whatever was within reach before anyone could react. It was not a one-time thing, either. This became a pattern. Sunday after Sunday, he would appear like a poorly written villain who refuses to stay dead, always arriving just in time to scavenge whatever had been left unattended. One time, he got even bolder. He did not just stick to what was on the table, oh no, that was too easy. He waited until people were distracted, then casually wandered into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and started eating cold wings straight from the container. No plate. No napkin. Just standing there, hunched over, devouring them with his bare hands like some kind of food gremlin. When confronted, he blinked in wide-eyed innocence and had the nerve to act like we were overreacting. Oh, he thought we were done with the food. He was just helping clean up. The audacity was staggering. But the moment that truly sealed his fate, the moment that made us realize that no amount of rules, no amount of shame, no amount of basic human decency would ever stop this man, was the cheesecake incident. One of our friends had brought a cheesecake. Not just any cheesecake, this was a fancy, expensive, bakery-made cheesecake that they had specifically mentioned wanting to save for later. They had cut one slice for themselves and carefully put the rest in the fridge, clearly labeled so there would be no confusion. That did not matter to Jonshu. At some point during the night, when everyone was scattered in different rooms, when the conversations had broken into smaller groups, when people were comfortable, relaxed, unsuspecting, he struck. He waited until the person who brought the cheesecake stepped away to use the bathroom. Then, with all the stealth and precision of a seasoned criminal, he slipped into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and helped himself. Not to a slice. Not to some of it. To all of it. By the time the rightful owner of the cheesecake returned, it was too late. The fridge door was slightly ajar. The empty container sat in the sink, the only remaining evidence of the crime. And Jonshu? He was back in the living room, casually licking his fork, looking perfectly content, as if he had done absolutely nothing wrong. That was it. The group chat that night was a war zone. The frustration had reached new levels. No amount of talking to him, no amount of setting boundaries, no amount of anything was going to make this man stop. He had no shame, no self-awareness, no regard for anyone but himself. The rule had only forced him to adapt, to become more creative in his mooching, but the problem remained the same. It was time for a different approach. If he wanted to act like this, if he wanted to treat our gatherings like his own personal buffet, if he was going to ignore every attempt at getting him to act like a decent human being, then he was finally going to face some consequences. We came up with a plan. Update 2. A week later, we decided it was time to execute the plan. Jianshu had spent too long feasting off the kindness, or rather, the sheer reluctance to cause a scene, of others. No rule, no confrontation, no ounce of shame had ever stopped him before. He had wriggled out of every previous attempt to hold him accountable, evolving his mooching tactics like some kind of freeloading Pokemon. No amount of direct conversation or subtle hints had made the slightest dent in his behavior. The fridge raids, the leftover heists, the blatant and unapologetic consumption of food that was not his, all of it had gone on for too long. It was time to hit him where it hurt. His wallet. The setup was simple, methodical, airtight. We invited him out to a nice restaurant, a place we all loved, one that had been a group favorite for years. It was the kind of place where the food was excellent, the service top tier, and most importantly, the prices high enough to make even the most reckless spender pause before ordering. It was exactly the kind of place where his usual freeloading tactics would backfire in a way he could not easily worm his way out of. The moment the invitation was extended, he was in. 2 in. His excitement practically radiated through the phone. He confirmed immediately, no hesitation, no questions asked. There was no, "Oh, I might be busy," no feigned reluctance to make it seem like he was doing us a favor by showing up. He was ready. That should have been our first warning sign. He was already planning to treat this like his own personal feast. When we arrived, the moment we sat down, Jianshu went straight into what could only be described as a predatory state. He picked up the menu and flipped through it with the kind of focus and intensity most people reserve for studying for an important exam. He was not just glancing at it, not just browsing, he was analyzing. Calculating. Strategizing. His eyes darted from item to item, weighing his options, assessing his prey. While the rest of us picked reasonable choices, an entree, maybe a shared appetizer, he went all out with the confidence of a man who had already decided he was not the one paying. 3 appetizers. For himself. Not to share. A massive entree that cost more than some people's entire meal. And as if that was not enough, he tacked on dessert without hesitation, as if he had just unlocked a bonus round in his personal eating challenge. He barely looked up, too engrossed in his own gluttonous planning to engage in any pre-dinner conversation. The only time he acknowledged me was when he casually turned, mid-menu study session, and said, "I've been craving steak all week. Glad you guys picked this place." Oh, we were so glad too. The food arrived, and as always, the group settled into the easy rhythm of good conversation and great food. We laughed, we talked, we enjoyed ourselves. The atmosphere was light, relaxed, and filled with the kind of genuine camaraderie that made these dinners such a staple in our lives. Jianshu, meanwhile, was in a completely different world. While everyone else balanced eating with talking, he was singularly focused, hunched over his plate, plowing through his meal with the urgency of a man who believed the apocalypse was seconds away. He barely spoke, barely looked up, barely acknowledged anything beyond the next bite. Every few minutes, he would shift his attention to his secondary targets, his appetizers, grabbing bites in between mouthfuls of steak like a man determined to set some kind of record. It was a performance. A spectacle. He was eating like someone who thought he had just won the lottery and was afraid the money might disappear before he got to spend it all. And then, the moment we had been waiting for finally arrived. The check landed on the table. That was when Jianshu made his move. It was smooth, practiced, almost impressive in its sheer audacity. Without missing a beat, he stood up. No reaching for his wallet. No moment of hesitation. No attempt to even pretend like he was considering paying his share. Just a quick, effortless, "All right, I'll see you guys later," as if he had just wrapped up a casual business meeting and was off to another engagement. It was seamless. A well-rehearsed act. He had done this before. It was clear he expected this to go like it always had. That someone, anyone, would step up and cover his portion just to avoid the awkwardness of calling him out. That the group would, once again, collectively sigh, exchange silent glances of frustration, and reluctantly divide up his cost among ourselves. That he would get away with it just as he always had, slipping out before the reality of the bill could catch up to him. But this time, we were prepared. Someone stopped him before he could take a single step. "Hey, Jianshu, hold on," one of us said. "We're all paying for what we ordered." He blinked, processing the words like they had just been spoken in an alien language. What? The check was slid towards him, the absurdly high number next to his order clearly visible. We each pay for our own meal, I repeated, making sure there was no room for misunderstanding. So your total is, I pointed at the number, letting the weight of it sink in. His face paled. The transformation was immediate. The confident, smug, full-stomach satisfaction vanished in an instant. The color drained from him so quickly that for a brief moment, I wondered if he was about to actually pass out. Wait, what? I thought you guys invited me. We did, someone else chimed in. We invited you to join us for dinner. We didn't invite you so we could pay for you. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted across the table, scanning for any sign of weakness, any possible way out. His whole strategy had been built on the assumption that we would cave, that someone, anyone, would step up and cover his portion just to avoid the awkwardness. But the table was silent. The check was still in front of him. No one moved to take it. That's not how this works, he said, his voice tight, like he was forcing himself to stay calm. If you invite someone, you pay. We all looked at each other. That's not how this works, another friend said, mirroring his words right back at him. You eat, you pay. Update 3. What followed was one of the most uncomfortable, yet deeply satisfying moments of my life. It was the kind of reckoning that had been brewing for months, maybe even years, the weight of every single Sunday dinner where he had devoured food like a starving beast without so much as a thank you finally crashing down on him all at once. Every time he had taken the last piece of chicken without asking, every time he had drained the soda without offering to replace it, every time he had eaten like a king while contributing nothing, it had all led to this exact moment. For the first time, Jonshu had no easy escape. No well-timed joke to redirect attention, no half-hearted excuse that people would sigh about later but ultimately let slide. He was caught, tangled in his own greed, and the realization of that was plain as day on his face. His usual smug confidence evaporated in an instant, replaced by a flicker of something dangerously close to panic. The moment it became obvious that no one was reaching for his bill, that no one was going to swoop in and save him, he went into survival mode. The transition was seamless, almost mechanical, like someone who had rehearsed every possible escape route for situations just like this. His first play was an old classic, one he had probably used a dozen times before. He didn't bring his wallet. It was almost impressive, really, the way he said it with such smooth certainty, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. Like this was just an unfortunate accident, a minor inconvenience that we, as his friends, would naturally understand. There was no shame, no hesitation, no indication that he expected anything other than the usual response, someone groaning, rolling their eyes, then begrudgingly offering to cover him just this once. But this time, the group was ready. Someone immediately offered to drive him home so he could grab it. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, he had no immediate response, no quick retort, no easy escape. The trap had already closed around him before he even realized it was there. His brain was scrambling for another excuse, another way out, but before he could fully process just how bad of a position he was in, the next excuse was already flying out of his mouth. He would pay us back later, of course. He always paid his friends back, he would make sure to get us all tomorrow or next time, he just didn't have it on him right now. Nobody moved. Nobody even reached for their phones to pull up Venmo. Instead, we just sat back, arms crossed, watching him squirm. One of us even stretched out lazily in their chair, leaning back with a casual, "Nah, we'll wait." The restaurant wasn't closing anytime soon, after all. We were perfectly fine sitting right there and letting him figure it out. The flicker of panic in his eyes intensified. He had never been in this situation before, never faced a group that wasn't willing to let him slide with a vague, meaningless promise of payment that would never actually come. The longer we sat there, unmoving, unbothered, the more obvious it became that his usual tactics weren't going to work this time. The pressure was mounting, the walls closing in, and for the first time ever, he was the one feeling uncomfortable at dinner. Then came the guilt trip. He let out a dramatic sigh, shaking his head like we had just betrayed him, as if we were the ones being unreasonable. He thought we were friends. Friends don't do this to each other. Friends cover each other when someone's in a tough spot. Friends don't sit there and humiliate someone over a meal like this. That was when I finally snapped. Friendship. Now friendship mattered. Because for all those Sundays where he had shamelessly eaten his weight in food without so much as a thank you, friendship had never seemed to include giving back. He had no problem stuffing his face with food that others had spent their hard-earned money on, no problem draining the last of the drinks without replacing them, no problem disappearing the second it was time to clean up. But the moment the expectation of contribution was placed on him, suddenly, he wanted to appeal to friendship. The shift in his demeanor was immediate. He knew, in that instant, that there was nothing left to say. No footing to stand on. No argument he could twist into making himself the victim. The truth was too blatant, too undeniable, too overwhelming to talk his way out of. His shoulders sagged, his entire posture slumping in defeat, and after what felt like an eternity of silence, he finally reached into his pocket. And just like that, there it was. His wallet. The sheer speed with which he had previously claimed to have forgotten it at home made the reveal almost comical. It was like watching a magician pull a rabbit out of a hat, except instead of gasps of wonder, it was just a table full of unimpressed, deeply vindicated people watching him dig out a wad of cash. Without a word, he peeled off the bills, sliding them onto the table with a visible grimace, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might actually crack a tooth. It was painful to watch. The man who had spent months pretending he couldn't afford to chip in, who had played the broke card at every possible opportunity, was now parting with his money like it physically hurt him. And maybe it did hurt, not just the spending itself, but the loss of control, the sudden realization that the system he had spent so long exploiting had finally turned against him. The entire table sat in stunned silence, watching as he finally, paid his own way. And then, just when we thought the night was over, when it seemed like justice had been served and we could all move on, someone leaned forward with a smirk and dropped the final bombshell. Since we were on the topic of paying for things, it seemed like the perfect time to discuss all those meals he owed us for. The reaction was instant. His entire body tensed, his fingers curling around his wallet like it might somehow shield him from the inevitable. He opened his mouth, probably to protest, but it was already too late. The floodgates had opened. One by one, every single person at that table started listing off every instance of his freeloading. The chicken, the wings, the cinnamon rolls, the drinks, the desserts. Every single Sunday meal where he had eaten enough to feed a small village while conveniently never having money to contribute. It was all laid out, a backlog of unpaid debts so vast he could never hope to talk his way around it. He tried the friendship excuse again, but this time it fell completely flat. Another friend cut him off before he could even finish the sentence. Friendship wasn't supposed to be a free meal ticket. Friendship wasn't supposed to be one-sided. Friendship wasn't supposed to mean watching someone take and take and take while never giving anything in return. And in that moment, with every single person refusing to let him off the hook, Johnshu did the unthinkable. He paid us back. Grumbling under his breath, huffing and sighing like a man being forcibly removed from his comfort zone, he pulled out his phone and started Venmoing each of us. Slowly, reluctantly, with the enthusiasm of someone being forced to confess to a crime. It wasn't much per person, not in the grand scheme of things, but that wasn't the point. The point was that for once, after months of taking advantage of us, he was finally being held accountable. And that was worth everything.